by the band's third release, GNR Lies.
Guns N' Roses, when they first hit big, when Appetite was seen as a raw, raucous, loud rock and roll band, there was another side to them. They could play acoustically. And what Lies was an opportunity to showcase their acoustic presentation of songs and to prove the songs are great, however you played them, because when you strip down to an acoustic situation, the songs and the performers have to stand up in their own right. There's no hiding. And what they proved on that EP is they didn't need to hide.
I really like the acoustic songs on it. I mean, Patience was huge. I liked all the songs on that side. My favorite was the most controversial one, One in a Million, that everyone jumped on his head for being, you know, prejudiced and misogynist and everything, and homophobic and everything, before Eminem. He hit those subject areas before Eminem ever did. The biggest difference appears to be that initially, although Axl resisted it, he did apologize for the lyrics, which I thought was way out of character, but he did it.
One in a Million was very much an Axl biographical song about growing up in the Midwest in a situation where you became very entrenched and narrow-minded, where racism is endemic and almost taken as part of life. What Axl was doing in that song was putting forward his own viewpoint at the time, saying, I mean, faggots don't mean a thing to me. I'm not really interested in them, and I don't understand them, and I don't want to understand them. But of course, people immediately picked up on it and said, oh my God, he's being racist, being homophobic, etc., etc. Yes, he was, in terms of explaining his upbringing. Again, it fueled the fire about the reputation. Here they come, the world's most dangerous band, again, living on the edge.
By 1989, Axl had become one of the most famous rock stars in the world. However, it was to be a difficult year for him and the band. His marriage to Erin Everly had lasted only a matter of months, and Steven Adler left Guns N' Roses to be replaced by Matt Sorum. During this turbulent time, he also recorded Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. With the albums cut, the band began a protracted mixing process.
Well, I don't think it's new news that there was a lot of push and pull within Guns N' Roses, with everybody having very defined ideas of what they wanted, you know, from the record and from the band. Not necessarily always agreeing with each other, but certainly everybody had an idea of what they wanted it to be. There was a certain amount of Axl coming in and being happy with the mix, and then Slash coming in and going, no, that's not what I'm looking for, and making a few changes, and then Axl would come in and say, well, you know, this is better, but this isn't, and going back and forth. Anytime you're working with a band that big, it's going to take some time to mix a record, no matter what the circumstances are. I mean, in this case, you know, Axl had to approve it, Slash had to approve it, Tom had to approve it, and the manager had to approve it. Probably David Geffen had to approve it, you know. And so you get 5 different opinions. It's going to take 5 times longer than if one person is approving it. And it was such a huge, important record that they wanted it to be perfect.
It took 6 months to mix the 2 albums, but finally, in September 1991, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 were released simultaneously.
Well, first of all, it's the only band in history that ever put out 2 albums simultaneously, 2 separate albums simultaneously. First time I'd ever seen a record be sold starting at midnight throughout the country. There were lines of people out in front of Tower Records. We watched it on the news. You know, we were part of a record that was on the news upon its release. And these records went gold simultaneously within something like 5 hours of the time that it was released. I mean, who sells 1 million records in 5 hours? Guns N' Roses. That's it.
Guns N' Roses are the only band I can think of following up one of the biggest albums of all time, one of the most talked about albums of all time, by saying to their record label, we want to put out a double album. No, actually, we want to put out 2 double albums. We want to put out, effectively, 4 albums at the same time. No one else would have done it. No one else would have got away with it. And Geffen must have looked back in astonishment. What Guns N' Roses wanted to do was to say, look, we're not going to go into the studio and record 14 songs and have 9 appear in an album and 5 dumped in the vault. We want everything we record put out.
Use Your Illusion also began to illustrate another side of Axl's songwriting.
I think as a ballad writer, Axl does have an awful lot to offer. He understands why ballads work. He understands the dynamics of a song. So does Slash. And that's the thing that people came to realize, I think, with the Use Your Illusion albums, that here was this rock and roll band who could also step back a little bit, allow a song to breathe, and give it the momentum and timbre that brings out the best in the lyrics and best in the melodies.
During the tour to promote Use Your Illusion, Izzy Stradlin left Guns N' Roses, severing the alliance formed back in Jefferson High School.
I always thought that Izzy and Axl were like Lennon and McCartney. And when Izzy left the band, it was a big deal, you know, at least as far as I was concerned. I mean, but, you know, he didn't tour with us anyway. We took a jet, and he had his own tour bus. And so he would tow a trailer with his motorcycles and everything so he could go riding and have fun. He loves to travel. Izzy's a big map guy, too. And so, you know, like wherever we were, he would just meet up with us. We'd fly in, and he would drive in. So, but I started seeing a split then. I don't think Izzy ever wanted the band to get that big. Izzy's the type of guy that he would have been very happy just staying in the clubs.
When Izzy left the band, I felt it was the beginning of the end because I felt he was one of the cornerstones of that band. I mean, he did a lot of the writing with Axl. He was Axl's closest friend. He was a guy who got Axl out of Indiana and coming to Hollywood because Izzy was here first. He left first, and he hated Indiana. And so Axl came to join Izzy. And when he left, you know, you think of it, it's like, you know, Lennon leaving McCartney. It's like Paul Stanley leaving Gene Simmons. I mean, when you have a duo like that, a dynamic duo who forms a colossal band, when one of them leaves, a significant dynamic is going to be missing.
Izzy, to me, actually was the soul of Guns N' Roses. Axl and Slash were the public face and very much the pumping heart. Izzy was the soul. Izzy just had enough of a lot of the nonsense that went around. You've got to remember, this was the band who went from nothing street urchins, if you want to put it in that phrase, to being the most recognizable faces in the world. And I think Izzy got fed up, not with necessarily the fame, but the trappings and what happened to the band. Axl became more and more reclusive, more and more demanding, more and more insistent, more and more of a control freak. And I think Izzy just reached the point of saying, I don't need this, I don't want it, goodbye.
Gilby Clarke was brought in to replace Stradlin on guitar, and Guns N' Roses continued on what would become a 28-month tour.
I remember when we started the tour, you know, that was Rock in Rio, and that was the first time I think they'd ever played in front of a crowd that size, and it was like 115,000 people. You know, we started going on from there, and then the band just started building and building and building. The shows were sold out. Yeah, I mean,